Okay, quick 10-second elevator pitch. What if I could actually increase the dynamic range on your camera without going into any sort of settings or anything like external recording or anything like that, S-Log? No, this is graduated filters. This is an interesting video because they actually use these in Top Gun 1 and 2. Graduated filters are incredible when it comes to filmmaking. Sure, they're a stylistic choice, but if you don't know what this is, quick 10 seconds, ND at the top, no ND down the bottom. Essentially it makes the skies darker, correct exposure down the bottom, and you can get some nice moody skies out of this. And that's what they did use in a lot of films and not just Top Gun. But this is great because magnetic. I love magnets. Magnets are great. And just before the keyboard warriors start getting into the comment section saying, oh, you can't increase the dynamic range. Well, it's not actually increasing dynamic range, just the appearance of it. So I'll explain it later on. Let's get into it. What's going on, my friends? I hope you're all doing absolutely fantastic. And if you are new to my channel, please consider subscribing. We do a whole bunch of videos on, obviously, videography, a little bit of photography, and just gear in general because we all love gear. Today we're going to be talking about ND filters and the hassles of why I've actually moved away from these screw-on ones on here. I'm going to explain it in just a second because matte box ones suit me and suit my style. It may not suit you, so this video might not actually be for you, but there's some interesting things you need to know about ND filters and matte box systems and the versatility of having something like this. And I'd just like to jump in and say, give this video a thumbs up because I know a lot of you guys are watching and not, giving it a thumbs up. That would be amazing. Subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't already. Let's get back into this video about this matte box. So some of the biggest reasons why you would actually utilize a matte box system like this, obviously, is to cut back on the light of the sun. So you do have the French flag on pretty much every single matte box. These are really good. Some of the bigger matte boxes will have French flags on the sides as well, in case you do have light coming in from the sides. And if you have anamorphic lenses, you're trying to block those flares and obviously not try and get flares, or you're just trying to block flares in general. These ones are really good for that. Now, they can allow for drop-in filters as well. This one actually has drop-in ND filters, or you can have circular polarizer, you can have mist filters, but this I've been wanting for quite some time. You can see it is a gradient filter. Now, gradient filters are extremely good and extremely useful. They actually utilize gradient filters in Top Gun #1, and they had to use it in #2 to match #1 because the cinematographer actually utilized the gradient filters in the first one. So they had to make sure that the second one had a very similar look. And gradient filters are really good because if you have a really bright sky, you can actually dim that sky with an ND at the top, and then it sort of gradients down to nice and clear, which could be very handy for a lot of situations, especially high key situations. And it's as easy as putting it back in by magnets. It's so simple with that one. Now, like I said, this one actually has drop-in filters, and this one is a variable ND filter. Now, the great thing about this variable ND filter, you will not have a cross pattern, mainly for the fact that it has hard stops. Pretty much all good ND filters these days have hard stops to stop that cross section that you get with all the cheap ones. Now, the drop-in ND filters are actually really interesting, and the way that ND filters work, essentially they're pretty much two circular polarizing filters that are on top of each other, and they cross match, and essentially that's how you get that neutral density. And they do come apart, and you can just utilize the CPL right here, or the circular polarizing filter by itself, and you can just get rid of the ND and just drop this one in, or you put them together and then you've got an ND filter. Otherwise, you can take these out as well, like so. So see, this one pops out, and then you've got this empty tray, so you can put a mist filter in here as well, because I know a lot of people love using mist filters, especially me. I love mist filters. And if you do have a cinema camera like me and has built-in ND filters, then obviously mist filter is perfect. A gradient filter on the front makes it even better. Obviously, it definitely depends on what you shoot and how you shoot, but this is so much more versatility than just this. Now you can see one of the biggest benefits of this gradient filter or graduated filter is actually bringing down the exposure in the sky. If you really have bright skies, this could be a really interesting tool to have in your arsenal. Now, you probably wouldn't utilize this all the time, but it does make a pretty big difference in some situations where you do want that feel and that vibe of the sky. And it actually makes it look like you have more dynamic range in your camera because you're able to expose for the shadows down below and then keep the sky nice and exposed. Now, what if you are an APS-C user? Well, I mean, you can see it right away. This thing is big. If this isn't a design issue of the Case magnetic matte box, this is pretty much every matte box system. They're going to be big. Sure, there are ones that are slightly thinner, slightly smaller, but they're generally around about the same size. And if you don't like running a bigger system like this, then you would probably just go for a screw-on ND filter. Now, there are pros and cons to each of them. I personally prefer this, but if you are trying to, fly this on a gimbal, it is front heavy, it's a lot bigger, it can get in the way. But with this one, you can actually remove that front matte box part and you've just got this. So it does make it just that little bit smaller and you still have that variable ND filter on the front there, and you can still utilize this gradient or gradual filter as well, or you can take it off and just have this. It really depends on you, but I think that's the pro of this one, is that you can just make it just that little bit smaller if you don't want this full giant system on the front of your APS-C system. But it's up to you. It really is up to you. Now here is this shot without any ND filters. I did have to crank the shutter at 1/6400th of a second. Here is the Case one at maximum MD, and I had to do 1/25th of a second shutter. And here is a competitor Freewell's ND filter at maximum 9 ND at 1/50th of a shutter. Now you can see there's a bit of color tone difference between these filters and natural. Well, it happens a lot with a lot of ND filters, so you are going to have to correct that in post or in camera. There's always a warmy tint or sometimes a magenta sort of tint, but this one tends to be a little bit warmer. Now the great thing about these things here is that if you have a couple of these and you have a couple of sized lenses, you can leave these on the other lenses and then you can quickly swap them over. Otherwise, if you don't, you obviously have to unscrew this, screw it to the lens, then put the matte box straight on. But this one comes with the 67, 72, 77, and 82. So there's 4 in the boxes here, which generally suit full frame. If you do want obviously smaller than this, then just get step up rings. It's probably the easiest thing to do. But these are really interesting. Now there's one little trick that I generally do, and that's with the 72, I get a 67 to 72 millimeter step up ring, and then I can leave it on my other 67 millimeter lenses. So I don't have to unscrew this one and then put this one on. I can just leave the other one on and then just slot it straight on. So much easier. So what do you guys think? I actually like this. It's pretty decent. I love how it's a little bit different to all the other brands. Now the other brands tend to follow each other. This one's thinking a little bit outside the box by adding a lot of different magnets and trying to attach it in quicker, different ways. Now magnets generally are a really good idea. Some of them are just a good idea. It's not really practical in the filmmaking sense, but the ability to take these off really quickly is super handy. It happens all the time when you're changing from lens to lens, and then you go to a wider lens and you're like, I need to take this off, and then it just takes ages to take off. Some of them don't actually come off as well. Some of them are pretty much stuck there. It is part of the front matte box. So you can actually see here that the 16mm lens on the Tilta Mirage Matchbox system is a little bit too wide, and you can see the edges, and that sucks. That really does suck. And you can't use a wider lens than 20mm. And with the Case Matchbox system, obviously you can use your 16mm lens. You don't see the outsides. Plus you can still take off that front as well if the lens is just a little bit too wide, and you're pretty much safe. So anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. That would be absolutely amazing. The link will be in the description below if you do want to check this Matchbox system out. And yeah, other than that, I'll see you guys in the next one. All right, let's get it.